At first glance, Scotland's landscape feels ancient. But what if the truth is that it was shaped by one of the most violent transformations in Europe? Every valley, every ridge, every isolated coastline is a remnant of something powerful enough to erase entire mountain chains and carve new ones in their place. And without understanding that, the country's most famous places lose their deeper story. But once these hidden forces come into view, the entire landscape begins to form a pattern that's impossible to ignore. Before exploring Scotland's wonders, we'll start with the key facts that reveal why this land looks the way it does. And later on, a single view will make their influence unmistakable. To understand Scotland's most extraordinary places, it helps to know what shaped them. And the story begins far deeper in time than most people imagine. Millions of years before humans arrived, before the first traces of Celtic culture or medieval kingdoms, this land was part of a collision so intense it welded together two ancient continents. That collision forged a mountain range taller than the Alps of today, stretching across what is now northern Europe. Over time, wind, rain, ice, and shifting oceans ground those mountains down, leaving behind fragments of peaks and deep-cut valleys that still define the country. The distances involved were enormous. Glaciers moved across the land for hundreds of kilometers, sometimes more than 300 kilometers, nearly 190 miles, carving shapes that still remain. One of the most surprising truths is that Scotland once sat much closer to the equator. The rocks beneath your feet were formed in tropical climates, desert climates, and even environments similar to modern coral seas. This constant movement reshaped everything. Across Scotland, you can find sandstone, created in scorching heat right beside stone, formed in freezing, ice-dominated landscapes. Few places in the world compress so much geological variety into such a small area, sometimes within just 50 kilometers, about 30 miles. But what truly transformed Scotland's appearance was the arrival of massive ice sheets during the last ice age. These sheets could be a kilometer thick, which is roughly 3,280 feet, heavy enough to sculpt entire valleys. When they advanced, they scraped away old surfaces. When they retreated, they left behind deep basins that later filled with fresh water. Many of Scotland's longest lakes began as scars left by moving ice. Long, straight, steep-sided, a signature shape found all across the Highlands. Not all of them, of course, but the pattern is too consistent to ignore. The weight of the ice also pushed the land downward. And when the ice melted around 10,000 years ago, the ground began to rise again, a slow rebound that still continues today. Some parts of Scotland are lifting at a rate of several millimeters per year, which may not sound like much, but over centuries, it alters coastlines, exposes ancient beaches, and even changes the flow of rivers. In some locations, the landscape you see now didn't exist even 1,000 years ago. This shifting ground has another effect. It reveals older geological layers. Scotland holds some of the oldest surface rocks in Europe, more than 3 billion years old. These stones were already ancient when the first multicellular life appeared on Earth. Their presence is a reminder that Scotland isn't just scenic. It's a geological archive spanning nearly the entire history of the planet. But Scotland's story isn't only geological. The cultural layers that formed here are just as striking. For example, the ancient Picts left mysterious carvings on stones across the country, many of which still have no confirmed explanation. Some depict animals, some symbols that resemble astronomical patterns, and some bear shapes that don't appear in any other Celtic art. Then there's the linguistic complexity. Scotland is home to English, Scots, and Scottish Gaelic, languages that evolved in different regions and reflect different periods of influence. Norse, Celtic, Anglo, Saxon. In the far northern areas, Norse influence remains especially strong. Some place names still come from Old Norse rather than Gaelic or English, a reminder that this land was once part of a Viking world stretching across the North Atlantic. Another striking fact concerns Scotland's unpredictable weather. This is one of the few regions in Europe where you can travel just 20 kilometers, about 12 miles, and encounter completely different rainfall patterns. Mountain ranges create barriers that split air masses, producing sudden shifts in clouds, light, and precipitation. It's one of the reasons Scottish landscapes change appearance so quickly. The light moves fast, the weather changes fast, and the terrain reacts to it in dramatic ways. Speaking of climate, Scotland's peatlands are one of the largest carbon stores in Europe. Peat accumulates slowly, around 1 millimeter per year, and can reach depths of several meters. In some areas, the peat is more than 5 meters deep, or roughly 16 feet. Beneath the surface lie preserved plant remains, ancient pollen, and even human artifacts, sealed away for thousands of years by the oxygen-poor environment. These peatlands don't just store carbon, they also offer clues to past climates, helping scientists understand how Scotland looked long before recorded history. Another overlooked detail is Scotland's animal life. Red deer, one of the country's most iconic animals, can move across long distances, often roaming up to 20 kilometers, around 12 miles, in a single day. Their movement patterns over centuries actually shaped parts of the vegetation across the Highlands. Meanwhile, golden eagles rely on large hunting territories, sometimes spanning hundreds of square kilometers. Seeing one doesn't just mean luck. It means you're standing in a place untouched enough to support such a predator. And there's one more detail that matters throughout this entire documentary. Scotland's landscapes often hide their most important stories in plain sight. A ridge may look ordinary until you notice its angle matches the direction of ice flow. A shoreline may seem rugged until you realize it formed, because land is still rising slowly from the sea. A valley may appear peaceful until you learn it occupies the path of an ancient fault line that once split continents. There is a moment later in this journey when all of these forces align visually, a single view where Scotland's deep past becomes impossible to miss. When that moment arrives, the landscape stops being just scenery and becomes something far more meaningful, a record of everything this land has endured. The Isle of Skye is one of Scotland's most visually striking regions, a place where towering cliffs, winding single-track roads, and cinematic viewpoints appear around almost every corner. Its most famous landmark, the Old Man of Storr, rises sharply above the coast. The hike to its base takes less than an hour, yet every few minutes the perspective shifts, sometimes revealing the sea, sometimes the jagged skyline of the Trotternish Ridge. It's a rare viewpoint where you can see ocean, lochs, and volcanic formations all layered together. Further along the ridge lies the Queering, a landscape that feels purpose-built for wide cinematic shots. Deep pockets of shadow sit between strange rock formations, and on clear days you can spot the outlines of distant islands across the water. Many film crews choose this area specifically because cloud movements create fast, dramatic changes in the scenery. In the south of the island, The fairy pools offer a completely different atmosphere. Clear, cold water flows through a series of natural basins, popular with photographers for their bright color and with swimmers who are willing to face temperatures that often stay below 10 degrees Celsius, around 50 degrees Fahrenheit, even in summer. And as the road leaves Skye and returns to the mainland, the next location introduces a blend of history and landscape that's instantly recognizable. Eilean Donan Castle is one of Scotland's most iconic fortresses, set at the meeting point of three sea lochs. Its strategic location wasn't chosen for beauty. It was chosen because this narrow channel acted as a natural control point for ships moving along the west coast. The earliest fortifications date back to the 13th century, and the castle became a stronghold for the Mackenzie and MacRae clans. Over the centuries, it faced sieges, rebuilds, and eventually destruction during the Jacobite uprisings, when naval bombardment reduced it to ruins. It remained roofless for nearly 200 years until a full restoration in the early 20th century rebuilt it stone by stone. Many of the materials had to be transported across the narrow causeway, and the work took more than 2 decades, a remarkable detail considering the exposed coastal weather. Visitors today can explore its narrow stairways and halls, which display artifacts connected to local clan history. The setting is equally impressive. During high tide, the castle appears almost like an island, while at low tide, the surrounding seabed reveals patterns created by shifting currents. As the road continues through the Highlands, the landscape begins to rise sharply, leading toward a place where engineering and scenery merge in an unexpected way. Glenfinnan Viaduct is more than a famous film location. It's one of the most innovative railway structures built in the early 1900s. The viaduct spans 380 meters, nearly 1,250 feet, across a glen defined by steep slopes and shifting ground. To solve the engineering challenge, builders used mass concrete instead of traditional stone, creating 21 identical arches that distribute weight evenly. This decision was unusual at the time and later influenced bridge design throughout the UK. The viaduct offers one of Scotland's most atmospheric viewpoints. When the Jacobite steam train crosses, smoke drifts into the valley, and the curve of the track reveals the train from both the front and the rear, a rare visual effect that photographers often wait hours to capture. Below the structure lies Glenfinnan Monument, commemorating the 1745 Jacobite Rising, tying the engineering achievement to an important moment in Scottish history. Beyond the glen, the route heads deeper into mountain country, toward the highest point in Scotland. Ben Nevis rises 1,345 meters, about 4,413 feet, and is the tallest mountain in the UK. What makes it particularly interesting is its summit. Unlike most peaks, it's actually the collapsed dome of an ancient volcano. Evidence of this origin can be seen in the summit plateau, where fragments of volcanic rock remain fused into the landscape. Despite its height, the mountain is accessible to many walkers via the mountain track, which climbs steadily from Fort William. The round trip takes around 8 hours, but conditions can change quickly. Experienced climbers often choose the North Face, one of the most important winter climbing areas in the UK. Its massive cliffs hold snow and ice late into spring, creating routes that attract mountaineers from around the world. But even visitors who stay in the valley can appreciate the scale. Leaving the mountain behind, the road follows a valley shaped by glaciers, guiding the journey into one of Scotland's most dramatic landscapes. Glen Coe is often described as one of Scotland's most dramatic valleys, and the moment you enter it, the reason becomes immediately clear. Steep mountains rise almost vertically from the roadside, creating a narrow passage that feels more like a geological corridor than a glen. The shape of the valley was carved by glaciers that moved through here thousands of years ago, leaving behind sharp ridges and deep U-shaped contours. Today, it's a place where hikers, cyclists, and photographers stop repeatedly, because every angle reveals a different perspective. But Glen Coe is also known for a significant historical event, the 1692 massacre, when members of the MacDonald clan were killed during a politically charged conflict. Memorials and interpretive signs throughout the glen provide context, linking the landscape to the story of Scotland's internal struggles. The valley is also home to wildlife. Red deer are commonly seen on the slopes, especially in the early morning or late afternoon. Changing weather adds another layer to the experience. Fog can appear within minutes, transforming the entire scene. As the road leaves the steep walls of the valley behind, the landscape softens and widens, leading toward a body of water that has played a central role in Scotland's geography and culture. Loch Lomond is the largest freshwater lake in mainland Britain, stretching about 36 kilometers, which is nearly 22 miles, from end to end. Its size is the reason the scenery changes so dramatically from one shore to the other. The southern part is gentle, with wooded islands and calmer water, while the northern portion narrows and becomes surrounded by steep slopes resembling the Highlands. This contrast makes it one of the most diverse natural areas in Scotland. The loch contains more than 20 islands, some inhabited in the past, others left entirely to wildlife. One of the most unusual islands holds a colony of wallabies, descendants of animals once kept in a private collection, now living freely and adapting to the Scottish climate. Loch Lomond is also a boundary. It marks the transition between the lowlands and the highlands, a divide that historically influenced trade, culture, and movement across Scotland. The West Highland Way, a long-distance walking route, runs along the eastern shore, offering viewpoints where the shift in landscape becomes especially clear. As the journey continues along the water's edge, the scenery begins to tighten again, drawing the route toward an older structure that has watched over these hills for centuries. Kilchurn Castle stands at the edge of Loch Awe, positioned perfectly for defense, surveillance, and later for photographs. Built in the mid-15th century by the Campbell clan, it served as both a fortress and a residence. The Tower House, one of the tallest of its time, provided expansive views across the loch and surrounding hills. Even in its ruined state, the castle remains structurally impressive, with several walls still rising multiple stories high. The location is one of its most striking features. During certain times of the year, the water level rises enough that Kilchurn appears to sit on a small island, creating reflections that attract photographers from around the world. Inside the ruins, you can still see the outlines of living quarters, storage rooms, and defensive positions. A large barracks wing was added in the 17th century to house British troops, marking a shift from clan residence to military use. Eventually, the castle was abandoned after storm damage made it unsafe, and over time, it became the iconic silhouette it is today. Leaving the quiet shores of Loch Ness, the journey turns toward one of Scotland's most legendary bodies of water, a place steeped in mystery and scientific curiosity. Loch Ness is one of Scotland's deepest freshwater lakes, stretching roughly 37 kilometers, nearly 23 miles, along a tectonic fault that cuts straight through the Highlands. Its depth reaches more than 230 meters, or around 755 feet, which means the loch holds more water than all the lakes in England and Wales combined. This unusual volume contributes to its famously dark appearance. Peat particles from surrounding hills filter into the water, absorbing light and limiting visibility. While the legend of the Loch Ness Monster draws global attention, the loch itself feels quiet and remote. Its dark waters and long, narrow shape make it easy to understand why stories of something unseen have endured for generations. Along the shoreline, small villages and ancient ruins offer glimpses into Highland life. Boat tours provide views of steep slopes dropping sharply into the water, and the long, straight lines of the loch make it easy to see how glacial movement shaped the landscape. As the journey moves away from the fault line, the terrain begins to rise again, opening into one of the most expansive, natural areas in Scotland. Cairngorms National Park is the largest protected area in the United Kingdom, covering more than 4,500 square kilometers, about 1,740 square miles. Its scale is immediately noticeable. Broad plateaus, rounded mountains, and long glens create a landscape that feels more like a high-altitude wilderness than a typical national park. The Cairngorm Plateau sits at around 1,000 meters, or 3,280 feet, and contains some of the coldest and windiest places in Britain. One of the most remarkable features is the subarctic environment found on the upper slopes. Species like ptarmigan and mountain hares change their coats from brown to white as seasons shift, an adaptation normally associated with northern Scandinavia. Meanwhile, remnants of ancient Caledonian pine forests stretch across the lower reaches, home to red squirrels, capercaillie, and rare insects that thrive only in old-growth woodland. The area is also a major center for outdoor activities. Ski resorts operate in winter, while summer draws hikers to the high ridges where visibility can extend for tens of kilometers on clear days. Leaving the vast plateau behind, the landscape narrows again, guiding the journey westward toward a remote part of the coastline where Scotland's rugged character becomes even more distinct. Ardnamurchan Peninsula is one of the most remote regions on the British mainland, accessible via single-track roads that wind through moorland, sea lochs, and scattered settlements. This isolation gives the area its distinctive atmosphere. Fewer visitors, fewer buildings, and a coastline that feels untouched. The peninsula extends westward to the Ardnamurchan Lighthouse, the most westerly point on the mainland, offering views that stretch across open water toward distant islands. One of the lesser-known facts is that Ardnamurchan sits atop an ancient volcanic ring structure. The circular arrangement of hills and ridges becomes obvious when viewed from above, revealing the remains of a massive volcanic system active around 60 million years ago. Today, the geology appears in the form of basalt columns, unusual rock formations, and beaches shaped by slow erosion. Wildlife is a major part of the peninsula's appeal. Otters, red deer, and sea eagles are commonly seen, especially in quieter bays. The narrow roads often require careful driving, with sheep and deer occasionally blocking the route, a small detail that reflects how sparsely populated the area is. As the coastline curves northward, the landscape becomes even more dramatic, leading toward natural formations shaped by water and time. Approaching the northern coast, the terrain suddenly breaks open into a massive sea cave carved by two different natural forces. Unlike most coastal caves formed entirely by waves, this one was shaped both by the ocean and by freshwater dissolving limestone from above. The result is a chamber more than 15 meters high, nearly 50 feet, with an entrance so wide it feels more like a natural cathedral than a cave. Inside, a waterfall drops into a pool fed by an underground stream, and during heavy rains, the sound echoes through the entire chamber. Archaeological finds suggest that people sheltered here thousands of years ago, using the entrance as protection while staying close to the sea for fishing. As the road continues along the remote coastline, the cliffs give way to one of the most secluded beaches in Scotland, a place that feels far removed from modern life. Reaching Sandwood Bay requires a walk of about 7 kilometers, a little over 4 miles, across moorland with no roads leading to the sea. This isolation is part of its appeal. When the final rise of the path reveals the beach, visitors see a stretch of pinkish sand, backed by dunes and framed by cliffs. The Atlantic waves here are powerful, shaping the shoreline with constant motion, and the beach is long enough that even on busy days it rarely feels crowded. Local folklore is also strong in this area. Stories speak of mermaids, shipwrecks, and ghosts seen along the coastline, especially during stormy weather. While these tales vary, they reflect the remote and exposed nature of the region. After leaving the beach behind, the journey turns southward again, heading toward an island known for colorful harbor towns, ancient abbeys, and one of Scotland's most diverse coastlines. Approaching Mull by ferry, the first sight is often Tobermory, a harbor lined with brightly painted buildings. This small town became well known after appearing in children's television, but its history goes much deeper. Established in the late 18th century, it was designed as a fishing and trading port, and its color-coded facades helped sailors identify buildings from the water. Today, the harbor remains active, with boats bringing in seafood that ends up in local restaurants. The island is large, about 875 square kilometers, roughly 338 square miles, offering a variety of landscapes. The interior is dominated by Ben More, a mountain formed by ancient volcanic activity, while the coastline alternates between cliffs, sandy beaches, and sheltered bays. Wildlife sightings are common. Mull is one of the best places in Scotland to see white-tailed eagles, which have wingspans reaching 2.4 meters, or nearly 8 feet. On the western side lies a ferry crossing to a smaller, historically significant island. The journey there is short, but the cultural contrast is remarkable. While Mull feels expansive and varied, the next stop has a quieter atmosphere shaped by centuries of spiritual tradition. Iona Abbey stands on one of the most historically influential islands in Scotland. Founded in the 6th century by St. Columba, the monastery became a major center of early Christianity in Northern Europe. From here, monks produced illuminated manuscripts, educated future leaders, and sent missionaries across Scotland and beyond. Many Scottish kings were traditionally buried on the island, adding to its cultural significance. Despite its importance, the abbey is modest in scale. The stone buildings, rebuilt and restored over centuries, sit close to the shoreline, where turquoise water meets pale sand, a combination not typically associated with Scotland. Inside, carved grave slabs and medieval crosses reveal a blend of Celtic and Norse artistry. The atmosphere is unusually quiet. Even today, the island has few cars, and visitors often explore on foot. What surprises many travelers is how much of the spiritual character of Iona comes from its landscape. The island is only about 5 kilometers long, just over 3 miles, yet its beaches, cliffs, and open fields create a sense of space that contrasts with its size. After leaving Iona, the journey continues into the Outer Hebrides, where the next island introduces a very different kind of scenery defined by wide beaches and ancient rock. The Isle of Harris is famous for its beaches, some of which look more like the Caribbean than the North Atlantic. Luskintyre Beach, for example, stretches for several kilometers, nearly 2 miles, with white sand and clear water that turns turquoise when sunlight hits the shallow seabed. Strong winds shape the dunes and add constantly shifting patterns to the coastline. But Harris is more than beaches. Its interior is rugged, dominated by hills made of some of the oldest rocks on Earth, dating back nearly 3 billion years. This contrast between coastal calm and inland wilderness gives the island a distinctive character. Not far from the shoreline, weavers continue the long-standing tradition of producing Harris tweed. To carry the name, tweed must be hand-woven at home by islanders, a rule that protects the craftsmanship and ensures each piece has a traceable origin. Harris is also known for its wildlife. Otters, seals, and seabirds are common, especially in the sheltered bays along the east coast. The west, in contrast, is open and exposed, offering some of the best sunset views in the Hebrides. As the route heads north, the island merges seamlessly into its neighbor, a place where ancient standing stones and Gaelic heritage shape the atmosphere. Connected to Harris by a narrow isthmus, the Isle of Lewis offers a different landscape and a strong sense of Gaelic culture. One of the most distinctive features of the island is the Callanish standing stones, arranged in a circle with avenues of stones radiating outward. They were erected around 2900 BC, making them older than many of the structures at Stonehenge. Their purpose remains debated. Possibilities include astronomical alignment, rituals, or community gatherings. But the layout suggests careful planning, using knowledge of seasonal sunlight. The island's west coast is shaped by powerful Atlantic waves, creating long stretches of sand broken by rocky headlands. Crofting, small-scale agriculture, remains part of everyday life, and visitors can see traditional peat cuts in the moorland, where locals harvest peat for fuel. Lewis is also known for the Lewis chessmen, medieval chess pieces carved from walrus ivory and believed to have been made in the 12th century. Weather changes quickly here. Strong winds can arrive within minutes, reshaping clouds and light, and creating perfect conditions for dramatic photography. Leaving the Outer Hebrides behind, the journey returns to the mainland, where centuries-old fortifications and cultural landmarks await. Stirling Castle stands on a volcanic crag overlooking one of the most important crossroads in Scotland. Whoever controlled this fortress controlled movement between the Highlands and Lowlands, a strategic position that shaped centuries of conflict. Many Scottish kings lived and ruled here, and several were crowned within its walls. The Great Hall, one of the largest medieval banqueting halls in Scotland, was restored using traditional techniques, giving visitors an accurate sense of 16th century court life. One of the castle's most intriguing features is its defensive design. From its elevated position, soldiers could see armies approaching from kilometers away, miles in fact, giving Stirling a reputation as nearly impossible to surprise. The surrounding landscape still shows markers of past battles, including the site where William Wallace won a crucial victory in 1297. Leaving the stronghold behind, the journey moves eastward into a region where history and engineering converge in a way that feels almost futuristic. The Kelpies rise 30 meters, about 98 feet, above the surrounding landscape, making them the tallest horse sculptures in the world. Created by artist Andy Scott, they honor the heavy horses that once pulled canal barges across Scotland. Just a short distance away, the Falkirk wheel offers another striking example of modern engineering. It's the only rotating boat lift of its kind, connecting two canals separated by a height of 24 meters, roughly 79 feet. Instead of using large amounts of water or energy, the wheel rotates with remarkable efficiency, using principles of balance and precision engineering. Boats enter one gondola at the top and another at the bottom, and the structure rotates them in a smooth, measured arc. Together, these two installations highlight Scotland's ability to blend heritage with innovation. One looks back to industrial history, the other reimagines how that history can be used today. From here, the route continues towards Scotland's capital, a city shaped by volcanic rock, layered history, and tightly packed streets that reveal something new at every turn. Edinburgh is built on a landscape of ridges and volcanic formations, which naturally divide the city into distinct zones. The Old Town stretches along a narrow spine known as the Royal Mile, leading from Edinburgh Castle down to the Palace of Holyrood House. Its medieval layout includes closes, steep, narrow alleyways that descend sharply from the main street. These passages once formed small, self-contained communities, and today provide one of the most atmospheric ways to explore the city. The Georgian-era Newtown, by contrast, follows a planned grid design with wide streets and elegant squares. This contrast between medieval and Enlightenment architecture is one reason Edinburgh became a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Beneath the city lies another world. Vaults and underground chambers created during rapid expansion in the 18th century. Some were used for storage, others for workshops, and some became associated with darker stories involving crime and overcrowding. Edinburgh is also a major cultural hub. The annual festivals attract performers and audiences from around the world, temporarily doubling the city's population. Leaving the capital, the coastline begins to dominate the journey once again, leading toward a landmark shaped by birds, cliffs, and the open sea. Rising abruptly from the North Sea, Base Rock is one of the world's largest gannet colonies, with more than 150,000 birds nesting on its steep cliffs during peak season. From a distance, the rock looks almost white, not because of its geology, but because tens of thousands of gannets cover nearly every ledge. Their flights form constant movement around the island, creating patterns that shift with the wind. The island itself is volcanic, formed millions of years ago as molten rock cooled into a hard plug. This toughness is the reason the sea eroded everything around it, but left the rock standing. A lighthouse, built in the 19th century by the Stevenson family, relatives of Treasure Island author Robert Louis Stevenson, still operates here, guiding ships along the coast. As the journey returns inland, the coastal quiet gives way to a very different atmosphere, one defined by culture, industry, and a thriving modern identity. Glasgow has transformed significantly over the past century, shifting from an industrial powerhouse to a major center for the arts, education, and design. Its architecture reflects this evolution. Victorian buildings with elaborate stone carvings sit beside modern structures like the Riverside Museum, designed by Zaha Hadid. The Kelvingrove Art Gallery and Museum combines natural history, European art, and Scottish heritage under one roof, making it one of the most visited museums in the country. Music is central to the city's identity. Glasgow is a UNESCO City of Music, with hundreds of live performances taking place each week. Venues range from historic theaters to small underground clubs. The city's energy comes not just from culture, but from its people. Glaswegians are known for their direct humor and welcoming attitude, adding character to every street. Green spaces are equally important. Places like Glasgow Green and Kelvingrove Park offer quiet areas beside rivers and walking paths, contrasting with the busy city center. As the route continues eastward along the coast once more, the landscape shifts again, this time toward a dramatic headland crowned by the remains of one of Scotland's most striking medieval fortresses. Perched on a rocky promontory high above the sea, Dunnottar Castle is one of Scotland's most dramatic historic sites. The castle's position made it nearly impossible to attack. Steep cliffs surround it on three sides, and the only approach is a narrow path that winds down and then back up to the main gate. This isolation gave Dunnottar a crucial role during conflicts such as the Wars of the Three Kingdoms, when the honors of Scotland, the nation's crown jewels, were hidden here to prevent their capture. Most of the surviving buildings date from the 14th to 16th centuries, including the keep, chapel, and living quarters. Exploring the ruins reveals traces of daily life, from kitchens to storage rooms, with open views toward the North Sea. Weather changes rapidly here, and the castle often appears against shifting conditions, clear skies, sudden mist, or waves crashing against the cliffs. Standing here at the end of the journey, the full story of Scotland's landscapes, from islands and lochs to cities and fortresses, comes together in one unforgettable view. Scotland's landscapes may seem varied: islands, mountains, cities, and remote headlands, but together they tell one continuous story. Every place in this journey, whether shaped by ice, fire, or centuries of human ambition, reflects the same underlying forces that created the country's character. From quiet beaches to fortress strongholds and modern engineering landmarks, each location carries its own layer of meaning. Seen as a whole, they reveal how deeply Scotland's past is written into its terrain. Together, they form a clear picture of a land where history and landscape are inseparable.